So what you see here is basically like an array of different modeling steps of that shoe. You see that, for example, here on the left side, I started with a small plane, and then I subdivided it multiple times. And for those who didn't uh, have the chance to come to the workshop, the trick here is to try to figure out as how many subdivisions you need, so that, for example, as you can see in step 2, we can start by pushing and pulling, building the basic proportion of that shoe, so the outline. And when you never built a shoe before, probably you won't really know the correct amount of numbers. The art here is not to create a mesh that is too dense, because then you have too many points to manipulate. Shoes have very even and soft surfaces, so you don't want to have any uh, unevenness inside the geometry. At the same time, you don't want to have not enough vertices to model with, because then certain specific curvatures or details of a shoe you can't model, and then your shoe will look too simplified and too cartoonish. Because specifically with shoes, the devil is really in the detail. And in general, as a tip, when you never did shoe modeling before, you can either put profile images into the backdrop. For example, here I have kind of like a back image or bottom image, front image, top or side image, so that you have a little bit of a visual guideline. But what is also very, very useful is if you want to build a shoe, best is have a real shoe, so you can study it and take a look at it and really pay attention to all the details that make a shoe look realistic. So going back to the modeling, you see here in step 2, not only from the top but also from the side, I pushed and pulled some of the back vertices up, so we can start creating the shape for kind of like the heel. And then let me go into face mode. All those faces, for example, you can, or that object you can duplicate, because we can use it to create the sole model. And then with another duplicate, we can start building actually the main shoe part. It's a good practice to have this one kind of like as a step in between, because if we create the sole and then the shoe from kind of like this primitive, the matching line along the heel will be perfect. So as you can see here in step 2, I extruded the surface up a little bit and then added a loop cut at the center. And for those who are not familiar with the loop cut, I'll show you kind of like you can go insert edge loop cut, and then when you click somewhere, for example here, you can create another, like a loop cut, and then you have additional vertices and points you can work with. And as you can see, this loop cut is slightly at an angle, and then I pushed and pulled the points out a little bit, so I start kind of like bending that surface. And there again, it's very useful if you have an actual shoe to study, because you will see that the back part is not really as much curved as, for example, the front part. And then in the next step, as you can see, I selected only a certain amount of edges here, which I then used to extrude up and create those faces here. And let me go into normal polygonal view. So there you have the raw polygon model. And then after I extruded them up, as you can see, I started again pushing, pulling, kind of like trying to craft the basic shape of a shoe. And then kind of like in top view, I started planning in where maybe I would like the stitches to be, and then here your foot would get in, the sides is wider, but then the back actually comes a little bit towards your bone because it has to at one point cover your heel from the back. And here again, planning the amount of polygons can be very important. And okay, now when I say planning, it's not really that, how could I say that? I knew what to do when I was working on this shoe. I did a few tests, but I wanted to have kind of like a density where I have the ability to just skin in normal faces here. So I needed kind of like this loop cut here, which, for example, translates back to this line. And then this loop cut is, for example, this line. Now you might ask yourself, well, why did I build it this way and, for example, didn't just extrude this whole part here and then scaled everything up? The point is, again, devil's in the detail. Pay really close attention to the way how shoes are built. You can see, for example, how this is rather flat, this is still a little bit flat, and then this is somewhat boxy. But the front of the shoe here is really nice and arched. So again, talking about loop cuts, it's very important for shoes. You see that this area here starts to look pretty good. Now the left side is a little bit moved down, this side is a little bit moved up. It gives the shoe already somewhat an asymmetrical touch. The biggest enemy in computer graphics is the perfection of the software and what it does for you. And to get believable results, one key element is to try to rebuild nature's irregularity and imperfection. And you can see, for example, like this line here is very flat. No shoe and that area is that flat, which is, for example, then why I created this area here of flat faces. And you can, let me show you, pay attention to those points. They are, for example, here. And then those faces I originally extruded up, I can at one point then again use to create another loop cut. For example, this one. And then with this loop cut, based on the vertices where I have them and push and pulling, can change. Maybe let me rotate to here. It's maybe easier to see. Yeah. You see this is still very flat, and then here the whole shoe, if I double click on those edges, maybe you will see it. You will see that those cross sections have different shapes. This, for example, is a little bit flat, and then at the top it curves back. This part is really bent out, but then this one is a little bit, I guess a little bit tricky. This one is more flat. And again, that is really what you have to look for, trying to get the amount of geometry into your shoe model so that you have enough vertices to create all the different shapes you need. And you also see that, for example, right here, I needed to add an additional loop cut because those edges here, or the amount of CVs I have, are actually not enough to really build the shape I need. And that's not really a big problem. I mean, it's really good practice to start slow or low polygon, and then where you then need extra geometry, you just put it in and you have to do a little bit of push and pulling. And another nice side effect of this loop cut I put in, you see, because I did it, I also have then this edge, which I was able to push in. So I was able to create this really nice kind of like arc and then it dips over where it flows into the padding. Contrast to here where it's just straight flat. And when you want to make your shoe look really realistic, texturing is of course a very strong element to make something look good, and then you can hide like a inferior, or not necessarily inferior, but low quality polygon model below the texture. But specifically for products, people know it is really good that maybe you try to build it the way how shoes are maybe built also in real life. So you see, let me go back to this view, that at one point I selected those edges, and then with the extrude command, extruded out this geometry. And then I did a little bit of push and pull and scale. And I have another loop cut, for example, here, and then I needed to patch those in with a triangle. The reason why I have this triangle in here is so when I go into the subsurface preview, you can see how this point starts sharpening this edge. So initially, it actually looked more like this. Let me put in that mesh, then you can that face, and you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so that might look good, but let's go into shaded view. Subdivision surface view, and you see that this is nice and soft, but I have a sharper corner here, which is why then with the polygon cut tool, I created kind of like this geometry so that the mesh, when being softened by the subdivision surface algorithm, creases a little bit. And also, don't forget to, when modeling a shoe, maybe take a look from below, because you can see how, let me go to edge mode, let me select this loop cut, how the whole shoe bends in a little bit. It's not too much, but specifically here, the inside of your foot, it gets in a lot. That later for the renderings and the texturing will give it again a very nice realistic look. Simplicity is really your enemy when you want to do those renderings. And you can also see that from this outline, I created kind of like an offset. So like this one through the extrude, so that when I'm switching to subdivision surface, you can see that here, for example, the surface ends, but rather sharply. However, here it bends over and then flows a little bit into kind of like the sole. And if we later would put the sole below, let's maybe go to this model here, and you can see why that is important. It really looks like that the geometry flows inside, and then here's the sole, and then inside it's stitched together. Kind of like how you would do it in real life. You just stack them and either glue them and stitch them together. And if you want something to look realistic, just model it the same way. Now let's take a look at those two pieces here. That is one, the outside and the inside. You can see that, for example, here I started extruding geometry towards your bone because I wanted to start building the geometry for the padding. And this part is the inside geometry. Now there are multiple ways how you could do this. You could, for example, like I showed in the workshop, select kind of like an outline, and then we go to extrude, and then maybe you can scale it a little bit if it allows me to. There, and maybe there a little bit, not too much. And then we have to start push and pulling this, and then of course those points that went down way too far, because I want to simulate the material thickness already. So those go back up a little bit. A little bit more like this. Okay. And let's do another quick one. Let's put this one down to there. And now I'm going to scale and maybe quickly scale those back, and then let's select this edge, go to move, push this back. And there you can see how I started modeling the material thickness, kind of like the padding. And then that's basically what I have here. Like that's a padding, and you see how here it's thicker and here the faces are thinner. And then the trick is, how do you, for example, build then the rest of the shoe? And the approach I just showed is one way how we can do it, and it's definitely possible. Let me go, for the sake of simplicity, to this model. And let's go to extrude and open the command line. And there's actually a thickness. So what that means is if I type in maybe 0.2 and apply, I'm sure actually I might have to put in a minus. Okay, that was wrong. Minus 0.2. Let's see. Yeah, that thickness seems to feel better. Yeah. Okay, so let's say I'm going to quickly extract this mesh, and then all those I'm going to hide, and that was not what I wanted to do. Object mode and hide. And then this one I duplicate, and because I want to have two meshes, and then I go into face mode, select it, and then let's go to extrude again. And to make it a little bit easier to be visible, I go to -5, so it's inwards, 0.5, click apply, close. Okay. So as you can see now, I actually have this outer shell. So let me maybe move this one to there. And the inside shell. So and if I, for example, turn on the subdivision surface, and let's select those faces and delete them, so we can take a look into the thickness. So the thickness tool is a really great approach when you want to create, well, a volume to your polygon model. So you could create kind of like the inside and the outside, then build the padding, and then with the combine command, for example, combine different meshes back together. So let's show all the different models again. And I am so smart, I actually deleted that one. So let's only delete that one. Show all. Okay, good. Perfect. Let's turn this back on. Because let me actually click this one here and then Alt H. There, for example, you can see what I was talking about. Now there I have let me go to face mode. There I have kind of like the outside shell and the inside shell. And of course, here those parts are connected. And maybe let's do it this way. Let's cut this open so you can see maybe into the model how I built this one. And let's make another loop cut here and delete it. So there. So if you want to have a real thickness, now again, the extrude with thickness is a great command. Build your two parts separately and then we can later join them back together. So at this point, maybe let's take a look at how we could build the soul model. And I'm going to the face mode and I'm selecting those faces. And I'm going to separate this mesh out because Maya is sometimes acting a little bit funny. So if I have those faces selected and click on extrude, you see it basically creates a nice extrusion, but the lower part is open. And if I undo this, and then I go to separate, and I move this mesh out. Let's go back, select those faces, let's click extrude, and interestingly, the original faces remain. Okay, so as you can see, the upper faces are at a curve, and that's not really what I want. I would like them to be straight. So I go to the scale command and just scale them along this axis a few times till they're perfectly flat. And then, for example, I can move it down a little bit. Well, the edges are are slightly at an angle. So I'm going to have those faces selected and then slightly scale those. And there a little bit as well. So scale it. Okay, not too much, don't make it too aggressive. Just a little bit. Okay, so now if I turn on the subdivision surface modeling again, or the smoothing, you will see that it looks kind of, yeah, flat. Well, we need to sharpen this, and there are two ways how we can do this. So let's go to edge select. We can, for example, select this outline here, and then let's go to edit mesh, and there we have the crease tool. And that's something that's really nice about subdivision surface modeling. It allows you to sharpen, for example, some edges without adding additional geometry. So you can have your mesh at a lower density and get specific details normally you would need an edge or loop cut for. Let's do the same here as well. And let's take a look in object mode how this looks. But you see that there is some odd corner shading happening here and here and there in contrast to there. So creasing works sometimes, but it's not always a really good approach. So I'm going to undo it. And what we are going to do is simply add some loop cuts. So go to edit mesh, insert edge loop, and then maybe one here. And the closer you bring it to the edge, the sharper that corner will be. And let's take a look. Let's go into object mode and let's compare. And you see that's really nice and soft. This edge, for example, is sharper than here, and that is because we only have kind of like one loop cut. If I now go and add another loop cut here, I'm making this edge even tighter. There, you see that now? So not only one loop cut sometimes is useful, actually one or two is even better. So let's go to insert another loop cut here. Okay, so this is good. Now let's go to this view and let's go into the normal polygon view. You see that actually I have a little bit of geometry extruded into the inside. And you might ask yourself what the point for that is. And that is simply seen from here, the sole is not razor sharp flat. It is actually slightly arced. To do that, well, I need a little bit of geometry. So to do this, I could go ahead and maybe select those two faces and delete them. Then I can go into insert edge and maybe insert one here, insert one there. And let's see if the topology I'm going to create will work. Then I have to fill in some edges. Yep, that is good. And let's make another one there, there, and another one there, and there. I'm going to skip the back one because I first want to see how this looks like. That seems to, at least at the moment, look good. And then maybe let's move this just a notch, not too much, so we can give it a little bit of curvature. Yeah, well, looks good. So if you do it this way, then the shoe later when you put it on the ground plane, for example, the sole will not perfectly line up with the ground. There will be a little bit of kind of like irregularity, or it will look like somebody was wearing that shoe. So it looks natural. So that's, for example, the way how you could build the sole model. Let's take a look at those other parts that are really adding a lot of realism to your shoe. And as you can see, what I'm going to take a look at is this stuff. In real life, those are fabric elements that will be on top of the shoe. So instead of simulating that with a texture, I'm going to build those with actual geometry and then texture them so I can really have a nice kind of like material and texture depth on my model and rendering. And that really adds a lot of realism to it. So if I go to here, you can see that the way how I built this flows along there a little bit, and also in the back, for example, you can see it's not necessarily very good. So there I needed to make some sacrifices about how in real life I can manipulate actual material and how in computer graphics or computer modeling I can try to simulate how I could cut, let's say, this leather back and then how I could wrap it over the shoe. But simply by having it on top of the surface and then intersecting, that already will later for the rendering create very interesting shadows and highlights. And that is dramatically better than just putting those two together into one texture on a flat surface. Now, how could you quickly create, for example, those sides parts? Well, let me go into face mode and let me select this one and then let me separate it and hide the rest. Okay, So there are now two ways how we can build this one. And unfortunately, Maya does not have the best or most modern snapping tools anymore. So what we can do is make use of the live command. Make live basically makes this shoe model, you know, see it's a little bit darker greenish, kind of like magnetic. So I could create a face somewhere, maybe there. And then let's move it maybe to there. And you can see actually that I can't really, in this view, move it easily. It quickly snaps on this part. So to prevent the snapping, just move it along those X, Y, and Z vectors. And then maybe we can rotate this a little bit like this. Then maybe let's scale it. And let's double click on this one and set this to local or object. Yeah, it was object. So you see now that my move widget actually follows the orientation of my object rotation. So in object mode, if I rotate something, then with the local orientation, I can move it along its own object axis instead of using the world axis. So maybe like this. Okay. That seems to be not too bad. And then maybe let's go to the attribute and plane. One subdivision and maybe one subdivision here added. Actually, maybe let's make this 3. Okay, good. So the reason why I did this, again, it's all about simplicity. Start really slow, and then afterwards, step by step, you can add more detail, because I'm going to zoom in and then try to snap this geometry point. And I can make use of my local orientation widget to kind of like make sure that I don't distort my mesh too much. And you see that the result starts to look a little bit different, and that's all okay. That's because I'm actually snapping this mesh onto the surface. So here I bring it down to there, and here I bring it down to there, maybe one more time. And I'm using this ghosted representation of my 3D widget as an additional orientation helper. Let's go to there and there. Let's see what we can do here. There and there. This one. Okay, let's go into a 3D view and see what we have. And you can see that it pretty much nicely follows that surface. Now here I need a little bit more geometry. Here I need a little bit more geometry. So I'm going to the Insert Edge tool, add another loop cut, and probably do the same here as well. But maybe doing this in this wireframe mode will make it easier for Maya. Then let's go back to vertex and let's go to here. And then let's do the same again and snap on the surface. And I'm clicking the yellow ring, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that before. This way then you are not restricted to your specific axis. there, and there. Okay, so, and one more look. Yeah, that starts to take nicely the shape. You see here, I need even one more extra step. And then once you're done, for example, you see here, this one is not necessarily correct. Well, let's turn also the subsurface on. Then, for example, you could go to modify, and let's go to complete, make not live. So see now this one can be touched and it's not magnetic anymore. Let's go into the vertex mode. Let's click this one, go to the move, and then we can do some manual adjustment. And in this case here now, it's all fine. It can penetrate the surface. We have to trick here a little bit because modeling it in a way so that it truly really sits on the surface will be impossible with polygons. Well, not impossible, but extremely time consuming. That's where NURBS will be much better. But again, it's all for rendering, and we're going to render this object a little bit from a distance. So some of the irregularities or imperfections we don't really will see. So, okay, this done. Let's go into face mode. And then we can go and say extrude. Whoa, what do we have there? That is very odd. Okay, 0 and extrude. And then let's move this one out a little bit. Maybe let's go this way. Okay. Well, because we have back faces, we have this kind of sausage patty-like look. So I have to select those faces and then I can delete them. And then you see it will fit again. And then see I have to do again a little bit of manual adjustment. So here it goes in. And let's take a look from there. Here it can go in. And I'm moving it as much so that the corner edge doesn't show anymore, which means that I pushed it in nicely into the shoe body. And for example, here, I will move it till there and up and there and maybe down a little bit. Okay. Of course, the faces here are way too far outside, so selecting this and moving this back slightly. Let's go maybe into this view. That might be easier. And those edges I have to move up and then move to there. So I try to maintain a little bit of correct material thickness. This edge maybe goes down, that one goes down, and that one goes down a notch. Yeah, and here, there, I need one more loop cut. So let's do this. Insert edge. Getting that side seems to be okay, but not this side. There, that is better. And there something odd is happening. So this one I'm going to push in. Same here. Same there. Well, actually, there both can go. And again, those are some of the small time-consuming tasks that actually later really will pay off. Okay, so let's take a look. Oops, shouldn't have done that because in subdivision surface mode, then it all looks a lot better. And this side is too flat, too round, this is too round, so I'm going to use my crease tool and add some subdivisions. Let's see how this looks, and this way, and maybe this way. Okay. Object mode. Yeah, and then here I would have to adjust the position a little bit more. But you see, you can quickly block it out this way. So it's not really too much of a task. And let's go back to our original model. Let's delete this one. I don't know where this one came from, so I delete it. And let's take a look at those parts. They're partially modeled the same way. You can maybe make life easy by going in and selecting some of those faces. For example, like this. Oh wait, that's the inside actually, sorry. Let's go to the outside. So again, selecting those faces, or duplicating basically the object. That is maybe what I should have done. So this one we shift duplicate, and then in my duplicate I go in and, for example, I can select those faces and start deleting what I don't need. And maybe here this I select as well and delete those. I think it goes till there. Okay, yeah, let's maybe leave it there. Okay, so the whole point was basically why to do this is I will end up with this nice edge outline. So here my faces perfectly line up along this part. And now I could use a little bit more of polygon modeling. So for example, in this case here, I can again make this one live. Let's go to this one. Let's go back. Let's go to vertex. And then I start pushing, pulling, and moving those out. And of course, this way then I can start shaping the outline. How I would like this fabric part to flow over the surface. And basically follow the same methodology. And here you can see actually that the mesh I created completely cuts into my shoe model. Well, this extracted mesh is flat. The shoe model is curved, so I would need to have an additional loop cut there. So let's go to insert edge there. And then, for example, this, if I move it up, see that this way I can even this out a little bit. But then those side edges also nicely lie on the surface, and then later if I'm done sculpting I can select everything and then extrude with a thickness, and I end up with something like this. So you see, it's not really difficult, it's just a little bit of smart planning and then making use of the snapping tool and the extrude tool, and quite often adding some extra geometry to be able to model the geometry or the shapes you really would like.